Hey guys, so honestly, just for getting the biggest flaw out of the way in terms of this episode, when I saw the title of the episode, I kind of knew instinctively that there was going to be like a montage of flashbacks from previous moments in the series with Jinbei, and while it wasn't as terrible as it could have been, it could have been a lot worse. It is still one of those. It is still one of those things where it did. It was one of those times where I wish I was wrong that it was going to happen because it did kind of drag the pacing down enough to be more than a little bit of an annoyance in this episode. But at the same time, like kind of expect. It's one of those things where it's kind of expected at this point because, as I said before, we are reaching that awkward moment of this arc where we're gonna see a lot more little shortcuts like that. And even though they are expected, I'm kind of holding out hope that if Toei is gonna go down this route, they'll at least get more creative with it down the line and give us maybe like anime only flashbacks or something anime only that they can do in order to stretch out the in order to stretch out the in order to stretch out the pacing where it doesn't just rely on footage we've already seen and whatnot. Like for example, when certain characters are introduced, I think that would be a good time in order to create like anime only flashbacks or something like that. But when they're but again, I'm probably hoping for too much. With that said, it was an overall heartwarming reunion in an otherwise like tenuous situation with between like the Straw Hats and Jinbei. And I love how when things did get serious again, we got to see Jinbei's capabilities as a helmsman, which honestly I think was an even better display in this episode of those specific of abilities here than we got to see in Whole Cake Island. And one thing I especially like is how, despite Jinbei's abilities as a fisherman being impressive in their own right, is his abilities as a helmsman that this battle at sea really set the stage for because this time on pretty much top of the fact that it put Jinbei's abilities as a helmsman to the test, it put him in a position where he has to use those abilities as a helmsman to steer the ship, like during a combat situation, like just in the way that this whole battle, that this whole the whole storming the front gate of Onigashima worked. I absolutely love how it put Jinbei in a situation where he had to use his helmsman abilities in a strategic way in order to avoid all the cannon fire, while pretty much also putting also leaving it open for everyone else to in order to attack. And yeah, I love how he was. I just love how he was forced to use those. He was forced to use those abilities in a combat situation. It really worked well. Um, Now, with that said, let's talk about Kinemon in this episode, because obviously, contrary to what Denjiro believes, obviously nothing about his arrival was according to any sort of plan or strategy on Kinemon's part. And even though a large part of what he does in this episode is pretty much him retooling and revising his existing strategy, like on the fly, pretty much. I do like how it doesn't entirely make Kinemon look like a fool, like fumbling all over himself either. Like, don't get me wrong, there is still a lot of that. Like, there is still a lot of that happening. Like, just Kinemon trying to keep up appearances as best as possible, but at the same time, as weird as it is, like for as much as there is of Kinemon just fumbling over himself and trying to save face, I do like how we have. I do like how it still does take time in order to showcase that like that Kinemon does have an understanding of strategy, even if majority of the time he was piggybacking off of all law suggestions. Like it did still take the time to show that even though Law was the one eventually coming up with the plan, it did show he at least had an understanding of pretty much how strategy works. Which honestly, if we weren't and which honestly, if we weren't taking into account that the enemy is Kaido, the the, the the whole thing and the whole thing of pretty much how the strategy was reformatted, and laid out here is a legitimate one in how quickly it could throw the enemy off guard. Again, though, because we are dealing with Kaido, I can already see just how this plan will fail, and it's not even because of any like holes in the plan. In fact, it gets immediate points for just taking Livy's recklessness into account. But at the same time, if it was anyone else, I'd say this plan would work perfectly. But because it is Kaido we're talking about, while also keeping in mind again the mistake Luffy made in last week's episode, it all just sounds too good on paper for it to work. But even taking that out of the equation, but I guess so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, obviously it is a good plan, and I love how this episode did in fact show just from how capable, just how capable, like just how capable he, just how capable in understanding Kinemon is of the concept of strategy. At the same time, yeah, all this just sounds too good to be true in general. But even taking that out of the equation, on like the episode itself was just kind of funny in general with how the comedy was just on point with this episode and funny as hell, and I laughed at just how much Denjiro's admiration of Kinemon just kept putting him into these awkward positions of needing to readapt on the fly and pretend like everything Law laid out was this whole other strategy, like he had his backup. Again, it is kind of it is still showing he has an understanding, but it's also kind of playing into that. Yeah, this is my plan, so just explain it for me, kind of thing. Yeah, and what makes this episode even more hilarious is just the revelation that Raizo is the only one aware Kinemon, I think, had no real plan outside of the initial one. I think the others do too, but I think like Raizo's the one who's like, yeah, this guy's got nothing. And yeah, I know I kind of already mentioned it, but I do still have to say this was probably one of the worst paced episodes of Wano we've had for a while, just from how it took the entire episode just to get to storming Onigashima. And don't get me wrong, when we finally get to that part of the episode, it does come back alive, but it's one of those things where that very small 2-minute chunk focused on the small, very small, like 2-3 minute chunk of focused on Jinbei flashbacks really did in a lot of ways break the pacing of the episode. Although, on the other hand, credit where it's also due, when the Straw Hats do storm the gate of the episode really does pop. In fact, I think that was the moment that Toei was saving their budget for the episode, because not only were the attacks well animated, but the way they designed the title cards for like the Straw Hats attacks was artistic as shit, and I don't think it was even all that much of a difficult effect in the way they did that. I think it's just a simple I think it's just like a simple border subtitle effect, but I'm still kind of actually impressed how they designed it. Like that was some artistic shit, I'm not gonna lie. Also, as weird as it's going to sound, keep what Usopp says at the end about the others not needing their help in mind, because it will come back heavily into play when he and Nami have to step up in a fight. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. I'm on Twitter, Analyst, Crunchyroll, and be sure to hit the notification bell and subscribe, and just share the video around, guys. Death Knight of Une, signing off. Later, guys.